our very first panel, which is entitled Building Trust. And it's put together by PAVE. PAVE, if you didn't know, stands for the Partner of Automated Vehicle Education. And it's a consortium of 55 companies and groups that are involved in all of this to come together and educate, provide information to those out there. I'd love to bring forward right now Kelly Nantel. She's the Vice President of the National Safety Council. Who better than to moderate this next panel? National Safety Council, if you didn't know, put together a website a couple years ago with the University of Iowa entitled My Car Does What? Because people were a little confused about it. So providing more information to consumers, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kelly to the stage. Good to see you.
For being here. It occurs to me that there are conferences like this held regularly all over the world. We have experts who come in to discuss policy implications, the technical challenges, even the economic challenges associated with making automated vehicles a reality. But I think we're starting to see a shift in the industry and even beyond that in the recognition that we can solve all of those problems. But if we don't bring consumers along on the journey with us, it could all be for naught. And I think Chris set that up really nicely this morning with his comments. We need to have more than thousands of experts solving problems. We need to have an army of ordinary citizens who recognize the power of automated vehicles and who want to push for it and be advocates for it. And I think that's really what this panel is all about, is how do we move from a focus where it's really on problem solving on the technical side and the policy side of things to really bringing those consumers along on the journey. And so I'm really honored to be here and with three voices who are working hard every day to build that public trust and to demonstrate to the public why they should care about automated vehicles and what they can do to help advance the cause. So first, I'd like to introduce Adam Vanek. Adam is the CEO of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And throughout Adam's career, he's built a portfolio of transformational achievements in private, public sector, and has extensive nonprofit experience. Prior to going back to MAD, Adam was serving at the Susan G. Komen in Dallas, and previous to that was the National General Counsel for MAD. So Adam, come on up. Thanks. Next is Nancy Bell, who's the Policy Counsel for Automated Driving and IoT at Intel. And in that capacity, Nancy advocates the company's interests before Congress, federal agencies, and other stakeholder groups. And prior to Intel, Nancy was a senior manager for external affairs at Fiat Chrysler. So Nancy, come on up. Thanks. And then finally, Eric Danko. Eric is the lead public relations officer at Cruise Automation, which right here in the San Francisco area. Eric is responsible for developing and managing market entry campaigns to build public support for self-driving vehicles and to also inform the public policy, which is something we'll talk a little bit about this morning as well. Prior to joining Cruise, Eric was the Vice President of Government Affairs at Securing America's Future Energy. So Eric, welcome. Thank you. How are you? All right. It feels like maybe we should have one more person. I don't know. Great. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate you all being here. I'm particularly pleased, as Charlie mentioned, to be joined on the stage by representatives from two of our founding members for Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, or PAVE. And we also have a little table set up over in the area there to talk a little bit more about PAVE and its mission. But essentially, PAVE is a coalition of industry and advocacy groups who have all come together with the mission of building the public's knowledge and their trust of AV technology. And so it's really in that context that I think we're going to talk about some of the hurdles and the ways that we can overcome those hurdles this morning. So I think it goes without saying that everyone in this room believes in the power of AVs, the potential, the safety, mobility, sustainability potentials of AV. But as Chris said, that's not true across the country. And we've got a lot of work to do to help convince people why this is important and why they should care about it. You know, as Chris said, AAA's most recent report had more than 70%, indicated that more than 70% of U.S. drivers would be afraid to get in a self-driving car. That's a challenge that I I think PAVE was designed to solve, and that industry is really coming together to talk about. So let's kind of dive right into it. I guess I would just start with Nancy and Eric and sort of the connection to PAVE. What is it about public education that aligns with your mission and the work that you all are trying to achieve in your spaces?
Sure. From Intel's perspective, we're very proud to be founding members of PAVE. Safety assurance is especially important to us. That's what the brilliant engineers at our company are working on. We think that there's the link between safety assurance and consumer education is very important. We've for a while believe, and I think many people believe now, that vehicle miles traveled engagements are not the correct metrics. We think that we need to demonstrate to consumers, to congressmen, to our legislators, to our regulators, that we can achieve safety assurance for automated driving systems. So that's one of our perspectives on it.
Yeah, I would echo some of that sentiment. But first, I really just want to thank you for putting together this panel and Velodyne for putting together this conference. It really is an incredibly important conversation. So as you mentioned, I'm with Cruise, and again, we're just like Nancy, we're thrilled to be a founding partner of PAVE. We test our vehicles 24/7 on the streets of San Francisco. It's one of the most dense urban environments in the country. And that also means that people see our cars 24/7 on the streets of San Francisco. And so public engagement, public education is critical to everything that we do. My team and I, we spend a lot of time working with communities, local communities, educating, engaging, teaching people about AVs. And that's really what we saw in PAVE, and I think it's something that the organization executes, across industry, with nonprofit partners, with academic partners, in concert with a variety of other players to really be able to take this educational component to the masses.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Eric. And Adam, you're not a member of PAVE yet, but we're going to work on that today. But we do have...
I'm still new on the job.
We have the opportunity to work with you and with Waymo on a similar campaign, Let's Talk Self-Driving. So why don't you talk a little bit about why MAD has a seat at that table, why you think public education is so important?
Well, in 2006, MAD created its campaign to eliminate drunk driving. And this, at the time, was a very bold statement because there was a lot of people out there saying that drunk driving was never going to be solved. And those 4 pillars are high visibility law enforcement, strong public support, meaning our volunteer network, public awareness campaigns. The next would be, is automated vehicles. Or not, at the time, though, it was vehicle technology. Yeah. So we're talking about 2006 here. And if you think about it, that's before the iPhone was invented. So we knew that we could change behaviors, we could continue with the campaign, we could pass tough laws, which is the 4th tier of our campaign. But in the end, to truly get to zero, it requires technology. It requires advanced automobile technology. And we knew that back in 2006. But I'll be honest, we had no idea that we'd be here today talking about an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think technology is at the heart of the Road to Zero coalition, of course, which you're a part of, as well as advancing proven technology as a way to get to zero deaths on our roadways. A big part of the PAVE mission is to communicate about the potential benefits of safety, mobility, sustainability. You pick the one that's most important to you. How about for MAD? What is it that you would want the public to know about automated vehicles and the benefits?
Well, I will tell you, as you mentioned, last week we visited with Waymo here locally, and I brought with me our national president, Helen Whitty, whose daughter died of a drunken drug driving accident or crash. And so she got her very first ride in an AV. And so she started out, hands on the handles, white knuckles, and she was kind of terrified, actually. And by the end of the ride, she actually turned to me and said, Adam, for the first time ever, I can see an end to drunk driving. So she went from being a skeptic, so to speak, to one of hope. And so what we need to do is get that message out, not only to the public, but to our thousands of volunteers, our thousands of victims, and letting them know that hope is on the way.
Yeah, that's a really great point. One of the pillars of work that PAVE has committed to do is to bring demonstrations to the public free of charge. So, we know that there's no better way of gaining some comfort than to get in the vehicle themselves. And I always tell this story. A number of years ago, we brought our board of directors out to Google X to meet with the self-driving car project folks and to get briefed on that. And in preparation for that, our board chairman said to me, he said, you know, Kelly, on a Saturday morning, I want to get in my car and I want to go left or right. I want to decide in the moment. I don't want a machine to tell me where I'm going. And I said, okay, sir, well, you know, maybe we could just go and take a look. And he agreed. We went out. We came out here. He got in the car and took a ride in the car. And when he got back, he jumped out of the car and said, when can I get one of these? How do I get one of these? So I think the power of just giving people a look under the curtain, a peek under the curtain, you know, is so important. Eric, with your company, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I would really build on what Adam was just talking about. It's something that I think we in this room really know, right? 37,133 people lost their lives in 2017 alone. And that number's been going up, right? It's moving in the wrong direction since 2015. A large chunk of that is drunk driving, right? Eminently preventable death, right? Layer on top of that the fact that 90% of those fatalities are the result of human error. Again, something that we in this room know. It's something that outside of these walls, most people don't appreciate. That's 100 people a day, more.
Right.
700 people a week, more. The equivalent of 2 737s falling from the sky. If that were the case, there would be a national outcry.
Right.
People would be demanding a solution to this, right? The fact that this happens and we just accept it as the cost of doing business in a motorized universe, that needs to be unacceptable to everybody.
Yeah.
And I think each one of us has the daily experience of seeing someone on their cell phone in the car. Personal anecdote, my son just turned 16 2 days ago. I think he views driving as a distraction from his iPhone. So he's been very resistant to start taking driver's lessons, but I think it's just an example of the generational change. You know, I think as time progresses, consumer acceptance might become a little bit easier with the younger generations, but I think it's PAVE. I think this just highlights the importance of PAVE and its public education mission.
And so, Nancy, from Intel's perspective, what is it that Intel would really want the public to know about the benefits of AVs?
You know, again, the safety benefits, the mobility benefits. Consumer education is very important. One way that we think consumer education is really going to proliferate and consumer acceptance is through the use of mobility as a service. We think that is the pathway to consumer public acceptance of AVs, the safety benefits, the mobility benefits. Through fleet applications, consumers will be able to get into the cars, take rides without spending the cost, or I guess assuming the cost of personal vehicle ownership. Because I think we are all acknowledging that AVs will be a little bit pricey, at least in the near future.
Right. You know, Eric, I want to give you a chance at that one because I know we've talked a little bit about some of your priorities and the real takeaways for Cruise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just building on what Nancy was saying, right, in a fleet model universe, you're addressing not only safety, but you can address sustainability as well, right? We're in California. We're always on the cusp of the next fire season. If you remember back to last year, the air quality in the Bay Area rivaled that of urban China in some areas, right? It's something that we should never accept as just kind of the way things are. When you look at pollutants in California especially, 41% of which are on the back of the transportation sector, right? It's the largest sectoral contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the state. The vast majority of those are on the back of personal cars and trucks. And so in a fleet model, AVs can actually be a catalyst not only for the remarkable safety benefits that they can accrue, but when married with electric vehicle technology, with EV technology, can actually be a remarkable expedient, right, and a platform to catalyze a transition to an electric future. And that's something that we're very proud of and passionate about.
Oh, that's great. You know, we all talk to really diverse stakeholder audiences, so I'm just curious from your perspective, what are you hearing from your stakeholders, and how are you thinking about how you talk about AVs for your particular audience?
Well, first of all, MAT is approaching its 40th anniversary next year, so it's quite of an accomplishment. However, we're still at 11,000 drunk driving deaths a year. When you add drug driving on top of that for a total impairment, you're talking over a third of the drunk driving crashes on our nation's roadways are due to impaired driving. So we're having this national conference, and the theme of this national conference is going to be getting to zero through technology. You know, I'm new on the job. I've been CEO of MAD for about 6 months, and then I am charged of bringing MAD into the 21st century. And we need technology to highlight technology to our partners, our government safety organizations, our victims, our volunteers, and we fully intend to do that next year through our national conference and have a big press release regarding that as well, and hopefully having vehicles there. So, by the way, you're all invited. Please come. We'd love to have you a part of that. But, you know, it's thanks to partners like Velodyne Lidar that really help us tell our constituents that this solution is around the corner.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know, Eric, we've both worked in PR and communications for our whole careers, and how do you break through the clutter? You know, working with PAVE and even just individually at your own company, you know, thinking about your audiences, what messaging are you delivering and how are you trying to break through the clutter?
Yeah, this is actually why we're so excited about PAVE, is that it meets people where they are, right? I think that's actually the secret sauce in all of this. AVs are a poorly understood technology at this point. It's a very small community of people who are paying attention to it. When it gets broadcast out to the larger community, it's not generally for something good that has happened. That's how people generally approach AV. And so it really takes an educational lens, right, in building kind of that acceptance and understanding. There's a direct through point from understanding to acceptance. And so working to educate communities, whether it's the environmental community about the benefits of AV from a ride-sharing fleet platform, whether it's working with the accessibility community, right, the blind and low vision, deaf, hard, and hearing, et cetera, and the remarkable benefits that AVs can bring to these communities. From a safety perspective, working with organizations like MAD, we were very proud to walk in the March Like MAD last week. There are remarkable benefits to be had for any number of communities. And as with any communications effort, it's about speaking to that community, to the individual, and helping them see value in this technology because it exists. The onus is just on all of us to make the case. And that's really why we're so excited about PAVE.
Yeah, so talk just for a second about PAVE. As I said, it was really... the idea came about because we recognized that consumers were just so confused. You know, we've got that folks calling level 2 technology self-driving. People are convinced that if your vehicle is in autopilot, you can take a nap. I mean, there was a recent study just put out about that, alarming study about that. The recognition that people are confused, I think, was the catalyst that brought the group together, and that literally hundreds of billions of dollars, you know, could be wasted if you can't bring those consumers along on the journey. And so I mentioned that there are 4 pillars of work that PAVE has committed to doing. One are the public events, including some demo day opportunities. The other is a really robust social media campaign, being truth tellers about the technology that exists today and what your responsibility as a driver is in those situations, as well as the promise of what's to come, and really helping consumers understand the limitations of where we are today. We also agreed as a coalition the need to do policymaker workshops. But what makes PAVE different is we're not a lobbying arm. There's absolutely no lobbying. It's all about education. And so those policymaker workshops are really designed to help those individuals who are going to make policy do it from a foundation of fact and not hyperbolic marketing and messaging. And so, Nancy, I think in your space, you know, what excites you the most about the potential with the policymaker workshops?
They have great potential. My primary audience are congressional members, congressional staffers. It's you know, interesting to see how, you know, these individuals who are working on autonomous vehicle legislation, you know, lack you know, sort of the basic knowledge about the technology, but also how the technology companies and the traditional OEMs work with US DOT. US DOT has been an excellent partner with the industry, but that's another educational component, is to assure the audience that we are working together as a community, and that the current structure that is in place ensures safety of the vehicles on the road. And so that's one of the key messages for our policymaker workshops.
Yeah, Eric, anything you want to add on that? I know you handle your work in DC as well.
No, I think a lot of that is right. AVs are this generation's safety technology from a vehicle perspective, right? And it requires a lot of education to get the rules of the road in the right place where we can actually expedite this technology to market and see all the benefits that we know exist.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. What do you guys see as the greatest barriers? And I'm talking from a public education standpoint, not the technological barriers. There are much smarter people in the room who are taking care of that than me. But what do you see as the public education barriers, Adam?
Well, I think the public as a whole, especially the younger generation, embraces technology. So when we talk about automated vehicles and getting that to public's trust regarding that, obviously MAD plays a big part in that because we have a network, a grassroots network involved with that. But really, I see the biggest obstacle, quite frankly, is kind of what you mentioned before, and that is government. Government has always been skeptical of technology. If you remember when Uber and Lyft first came on board, the taxi lobby was very successful in getting Uber and Lyft outlawed in the city of Austin, which is known for its technology. So really, I think it's gaining the public's trust via the representatives and kind of doing that. And that's what MAD does best. There's nothing more powerful than getting a victim in front of a legislator, sharing their story, and then explaining why this technology will not allow another person to die again from a drunk driving crash.
No, that's great. And how about Eric? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I actually think the title of the panel is perfect, right? The objective would be fact-based, hype-free public education. That is what we need in the AV space right now. There have been a variety of vehicle technologies that have come to market before there were official regulations in place or federal motor vehicle safety standards in place to properly regulate those. There's an interplay between industry and regulators at every level of government, local, state, and federal. And it is that dialogue that Nancy was speaking about a minute ago and being partners with these agencies that actually helps move it to market. And so that's what we really need, and that's what we're all striving for.
Yeah, it was interesting as we were thinking about forming PAVE. I had my own skepticism that we could actually bring something like this together and that it would work. About a year ago in June, we had our first meeting in Washington, D.C. We had 19 companies represented by 36 individuals who all came in to have a conversation about whether it was even possible for this very disparate group of competitors in many cases to sort of put a lot of those issues aside to say that we're going to do something for the greater good, which is, as you said, to be the truth tellers about where we are. And I think, PAVE launched in January at the Consumer Electronics Show, so we're still relatively new. It's been a 10 months of building foundational work. But we're really excited about what's going to come in 2020 and really getting out and being the trusted source of information about what the reality is in the AV space today. So I think there's some good opportunities there, Adam. We're going to have to talk over lunch about that. Let me ask you about the future. So, and again, let's just keep it on the education side. But if we're successful in building public confidence in AVs, how do you see that? How do you see that rolling out? And where are we in 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years down the road? Anyone?
I see success as autonomous vehicles being deployed at scale.
At scale.
I think that's a key point about PAVE is, again, a large number of competitors coming together. Everyone has their own technology, their own approach, but we all recognize that the greater good is scale. And I think that our key indicator of success in 5 years will be the extent to which we have scaled AVs, because you only see the benefits when you reach scale.
Yeah.
Really how I see this moving forward is basically on a market-by-market approach. So, for example, we know that Chandler, Arizona is very much involved with the autonomous vehicle and making that ubiquitous in that market. you working in the Bay Area regarding that. So I see really autonomous vehicle building trust market by market. And once you get to a certain level of exposure, then that's when I see full adoption throughout the company. I mean, we have our Bay Area chapter here today, and they've been very much working with you on helping create that public awareness and acceptance of this technology. So I think really that's kind of how it's going to be accepted across the nation. And I do catch it once it gets to a critical mass, really just becoming well accepted.
Eric, anything?
I agree with both of those. I think that's exactly right, and it's probably the merger of which that you would really see success, right? I mean, deployment and scale is the key to all of this. That's how you really do achieve the benefits that we've all been talking about from a safety perspective, from an accessibility perspective, from a sustainability, clean transportation perspective. It is the ability to deploy widely. That only happens with public acceptance, right? We spend a lot of time internally talking about, it's not just about the tech race, it's about the trust race. Right? You need the public to accept and actually want self-driving vehicles, self-driving technology to be on the streets, right? To be a solution. Not necessarily the solution to every problem, but a solution in helping us get where we want to go. Safer streets for all roadway users, not just if you're in a vehicle, if you're a pedestrian, if you're a cyclist, if you're on a scooter, or whatever the new mode of transportation is that's coming out next week, right? That would be success from my perspective. AVs are deployed at scale, are seen as a solution that makes cities safer, more sustainable, more accessible.
Yeah, I think, from a communication standpoint, too, we've got to be really mindful about how industry reacts following adverse situations, which when we saw that there was some positive movement in consumer comfort with AVs, and then we had the crash in Tempe, Arizona with the Uber, and then that number, the number of drivers who would be afraid to get into a self-driving car went right back up, and actually beyond where it had been previous to that. We spend a lot of time at PAVE talking about how we would react in an event like that. I'm just curious your thoughts on transparency and sort of helping consumers understand exactly what happened within the confines of what would likely be an ongoing investigation. Wow. Is that for me? It says a few more minutes. I don't think that was for us. Eric, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's the ability to have a rational conversation, right? Again, free of hyperbole, the ability to communicate rationally to audiences, whomever that may be, about what happened, what didn't happen, stripping away some of the misnomers, and then putting it in the proper context, right? That this is a developing technology that is not deployed commercially anywhere. And we are getting there, right? And I think, again, to latch on to the previous question, success is being able to have that conversation.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. You can't educate in a crisis. And so doing the legwork, the foundational work now, just only makes that potential situation better down the road because people have a stronger foundation, a factual foundation.
I do think it's critical, though, that the industry is honest with the public of where we are in this technology.
Yeah.
I know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was like, man, this is right around the corner. This is going to happen. And then the industry as a whole has said, wait a minute, let's take a step back. We're not quite where we are. We're running into glitches. Here's where the challenges that we're facing. So the timetable for truly having autonomous vehicles everywhere may have extended, 10 years into the future. So as long as the industry is honest with the public of where we are, it kind of builds an excitement regarding the technology. People want to monitor the progress of the technology, and then they'll even be more thrilled when this truly does come to fruition.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. You don't see the timelines being publicly announced like you did just a couple of years ago. That's a good thing.
As the industry evolves and matures, the hyperbole has given way to a really fact-based, transparent discussion.
Totally, yeah. So we're sitting here in, arguably the world's technology capital. And we've got lots of very smart engineers and folks in the room. So why don't I just wrap with my question. If there's one thing that you would want the engineers, the entrepreneurs, the pioneers in this space to know and to keep in mind as we're thinking about building the public trust, what would that be?
Well, I'll say for you business owners out here, if your engineers need motivation, invite us to come. Invite us to come and speak to your engineers and have one of our victims tell you their compelling story, and then also tell them what they are doing is important to having no more victims. It will give them a kind of a moral authority on what they're doing, because it truly is motivating as well as moving.
Yeah.
And I would echo the same. It's the human factor, whether it's the victim or the disabled or elderly or blind who need the mobility benefits in addition to the safety benefits. I think we have to keep in mind why we started working on this in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great point. Eric?
Yeah, we actually had Matt in our office 2 weeks ago. I saw Natasha Thomas as I was walking in, a remarkable colleague here in the Bay Area, and it really does drive home the message of what our engineers, what our entire company is working towards every single day. It is about the human factor. It is about saving lives, reducing drunk driving deaths, right? Creating accessible options for those who today don't have it, a more sustainable mode of transportation. It does humanize it. It's not just working on a line of code.
Right.
There are wide social implications here, and I think that's what makes it such an exciting field to work in.
Yeah, I agree. I know we're just about out of time, but before we do wrap it up, I wanted to just open it up to the audience if there were any questions for this great group of speakers. I know there's some folks.
If anyone has a question, we've got microphones on either end, and just raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone could speak to, obviously this doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are broader dynamics out there. The public doesn't trust corporate America. They don't trust government. Increasingly, they don't trust the tech industry in particular. How does this all fit into that broader dynamic?
I would just say that it's a matter really of building trust, and that's something that I think industry writ large, not specific to ours, but has really taken for granted over the course of the last X number of years. We're not in an industry where move fast, break things is applicable. You can't do that, right? That's not how you get the technology ready for commercial deployment. It's also not how you build trust.
Right.
So the onus really is on all of us, and through us on you at PAVE, right, to actually help up-level the public discourse and to make sure that we are communicating collectively as an industry in a responsible manner, not overselling, right, but actually communicating fairly.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is to be true to the mission of PAVE. And so to be the truth tellers and to be the trusted source. And the minute you violate that trust, you've lost the game. So we have to, as a coalition, and certainly my organization and everyone who makes up that coalition, we really have to hold tightly to that underlying commitment of being truth tellers, and that builds the trust.
I would also say invite community groups in to see behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Because community groups can be your biggest advocate as well as your biggest skeptic. And so they probably provide a more level approach and a more level opinion. But involving community groups helps develop that grassroots effort. So it's from the public support up that I think that really will help with that skepticism.
Right, and level setting, that's what PAVE does. You have a
Yeah.
diverse room of OEMs, tech companies, consumer groups.
Yeah.
And you help bring it together into one cohesive, transparent, objective message.
Right. Any other questions? Yep, over here.
Thank you. I have a question regarding setting up expectations for the public. We have been talking about how most of the accidents are due to human error, and promoting the idea that obviously autonomous vehicles will be much more safer. However, we are setting up maybe a very high target, because anytime there is a crash, we're saying 0 crashes. So how, as an engineer, you always know there is going to be failures. And so how do we bring this down to a point where people will say if it is 10 times better than a human being, or 25 times or something, which is more achievable target than 0 failures?
So that's a great question. I guess I would argue that any number other than 0 should be unacceptable to anybody in this room. Now, how do we get to 0? That's a whole different question, of which technology is a portion, but it's only just one portion. I mentioned a little bit ago about the Road to Zero Coalition, which is a coalition of over 960 organizations who work in the road safety space who believe that the only acceptable number is 0, because any other number, I've got to look down this line and say, you're expendable or you're expendable. The only acceptable number is 0, but what's it going to take to get there? What's it going to take to get there by 2050? We did a lot of work with the RAND Corporation and developed a report that lays out a couple of pillars, 3 pillars, and one is doubling down on what works. So doubling down on what works is, going back to the tried and true, high visibility enforcement, reducing speed limits, encouraging seatbelt use, demanding seatbelt use, taking care of our teen drivers and helping them be the best drivers that they can be. So doubling down on what works is an absolute critical element. Accelerating technology, we've talked about that in the AV space, and certainly that's a part of it, but we are decades away from an environment where the AV is the only vehicle on the road. So, how are we deploying technology in a reasonable, responsible way? But it's more than just AVs. It's automated enforcement as well. It's use of passive alcohol detection systems as a way to get at impaired driving crashes. It's thinking about distraction in the vehicle. And then the last piece, and Eric's hit on this a little bit earlier, is encouraging the safe systems approach and really addressing the culture in our country that accepts 100 deaths every single day as the cost of being mobile. We have to get beyond that, and that is a big nut to crack. And I think to do only one of those actions, we're never going to get to 0. But if we combine those 3 categories of actions together, that's how we're going to start to move the needle, and we're no longer going to see 40,000 deaths on our roads every year.
And with that,
thank you, Charlie.
We're out of time. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, panel. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yes, pleasure.
Boy.